All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, it's official now that Beto O'Rourke, the former representative of the 16th District of Texas, El Paso, is now running for the presidency of the United States of America. I mean, it's not really a shocker that Beto O'Rourke is going to be in the race, even though he was unsuccessful at winning the Senate seat against Ted Cruz in the 2018 midterms. It's like there was just an enormous amount of enthusiasm around Beto O'Rourke, and a lot of people were predicting that he would run for the presidency. I sort of thought that it was somewhat of a no brainer that Beto was going to be in the race. Why? Because, well, he didn't win the Senate seat and he wasn't up for re election in the House of Representatives. And it's like, what is he going to do next? Well, the next thing that Beto should do, career wise, would be run for the presidency and hope that that would open some new doors. Remember, Beto is only in his mid 40s. He's not somebody like Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden who is in their 70s and is at the end and they just have like time to think about it. This could be like kind of just a gateway for Beto. And that's probably what the way that he's viewing it. I mean, if I have to just kind of give some sort of personal analysis or something like that. But in all reality, is Beto O'Rourke actually a likely contender for taking the top seat of the president? Like, is he actually. And in all reality, I think he's definitely going to do better than some of the kind of potential contenders out there. Probably better than John Delaney, better than some of the other people, such as Jay Inslee, if he chooses to run. That's the governor of Washington, if he chooses to enter the race. I mean, there are a lot of people who are going to be in the Democratic primary that most Americans probably will not have heard of. When it comes to somebody such as Beto O'Rourke, we've done one previous upload about him on this channel, and the first thing I have to say is, I really don't like when people say that Beto came out of nowhere. I mean, Beto O'Rourke is that he didn't come from nowhere. He was in the House of Representatives for 3 terms. I mean, and before that, he was involved in the local political scene in El Paso. Now it's like John Delaney, also the guy we just mentioned, he was a 3 term congressman from the 6th District of Maryland. And it's like, they don't say that John Delaney came out of nowhere because it's all about age. That's all about age. They're just trying to kind of put Beto down because of his age, and that is something that I disagree with completely. I mean, no matter what you think about somebody's like politics, like they shouldn't be rejected solely because they're like 43, 45. But in all reality, it's like when we sort of examine the kind of likelihood of winning, some candidates get, criticized because of their age. Beto O'Rourke might be one of them. Bernie Sanders would be on the other end. They're saying Bernie's too old to run, but somebody actually pointed out to me that Nelson Mandela was 80 years old when he became president of South Africa. So it's possible. And even you want to talk about age, Tulsi Gabbard is only going to be 37, and a lot of people don't really focus on that about her because Tulsi Gabbard just has so many other things that they can focus on. Now, when we want to look at the presidential election right now, it's going to be very difficult for somebody like Beto O'Rourke to defeat people like Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden if he does choose to enter the race. Right now, I'm sort of thinking that there's going to be something going on between Harris, Biden, and Sanders, that those three would kind of be the ones to really edge their way to the top, which wouldn't leave too much room for Beto. But a very big thing we need to say about Beto O'Rourke is that he's most likely not running for president to win, to be president, to have anything to do with the presidency. I mean, some people have suggested that Beto O'Rourke would be an excellent vice presidential candidate, something like a Harris O'Rourke ticket, something like that, because it's like they sort of recognize that even though Beto is a 3 term congressman who has been involved in the local Texas politics for quite a while, actually, he is one of the kind of junior members of the presidential candidate circuit that the Democrats have going on right now. All right, so what do we want to do with that? Well, what I would say about that is that it's possible, but at the same time, a lot of Democrats are really taking exception to many things associated with Beto O'Rourke. For example, his voting record has been labeled as right wing. A lot of people actually are saying that when it comes to immigration policies, he has been kind of taking on a stance that is more similar to a Republican. They've also said that he has taken an enormous amount of money from the fossil fuel industries. I heard one thing where they said that he took more money from the fossil fuel industry than any other Democrat during the 2018 midterms, and the only other person in both houses of Congress who took more money from the fossil fuel industry than Beto O'Rourke was Senator Ted Cruz. In short, big oil and, well, all the fossil fuels were just pouring their money into the Texas election. But what does that say about Beto O'Rourke? This is just kind of what the criticisms of him are. It's just that he is just doing pay for play, that he is just kind of going to be backed by someone else's money, which is something that the Democrats tried to get away from. I mean, what I can say though is like I've heard Beto O'Rourke say very, very strong things to the contrary about many of these subjects. When I was listening to his TED talk that he did on the bridge between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, I mean, he was saying very welcoming things about immigration, about unity, and about, I mean, he's all about unity with immigrants and Mexico and all of those things. He's talked about that so many times. But what a lot of people kind of speculate about Beto is that he's going to be someone who has had more right wing things in the past, and he has kind of like more of a right wing stance when it is necessary for him to push his political career, and then more of a left wing stance when it is beneficial for him to push his political career. But what do you think about that? Like, do you think that Beto actually has secret right wing intentions? I mean, I'm not the originator of those statements. Those are things that he has been accused of by like Progressive Voice, the Tax Wall Street Party. They've called him out on this stuff, and like someone was even posting on Facebook today that I saw in my news feed that their friend is an economist, and they said that Beto O'Rourke actually has a right wing stance on most of the issues. You know, just like you hear these things in daily conversations. But what really is going on with all that? So I kind of ask what you think about that. Do you think Beto O'Rourke is secretly a right winger, or more likely that he is just going to be whatever side he has to play to advance in the political game? When it comes to somebody like Beto O'Rourke, I really think that a lot of people get lost in the personality. It's like they want to focus in so much on kind of the things about him that are just non-political. He can play the drums, he can play the bass guitar, he likes to eat at Whataburger, he can ride a skateboard. That has nothing to do with being president. It has nothing to do with anything at all. It has nothing to do with voting records. It has nothing to do with the most important thing. Where's the money coming from that is supporting his campaigns? Because I guess I'm somewhat of a believer in the sentence that came from the United Front Against Austerity when they were like, if you want to truly learn about a politician, you don't do it with hours of YouTube. You find out who is supporting them financially, because these are the people that are contributing to their campaigns and are going to be expecting favors. And if Beto O'Rourke is taking in an enormous amount of things from the fossil fuel industry and then is pretending to be some sort of left wing progressive, what's that all about? But again, I've said a lot of things now, just kind of like this is kind of just like a summary of an essay, just like these are the things that people are saying about Beto in the news. On a personal note, I would say that I've never really been that impressed with him. Listening to his speeches, listening to his debates with Ted Cruz, I really felt that he was kind of a lackluster politician that was somewhat right down the line, just kind of saying things that didn't have that enormous vision. And when you want to talk about vision, that's when you can listen to people like Andrew Yang, like Marianne Williamson, like Representative Tim Ryan from the 13th District of Ohio, who are talking about so many bold things: the freedom dividend, fighting back against automation, spiritual teaching, and the benefits of, human thought, or as well as the vision for the future about the real food revolution and the mindful nation, teaching mindfulness and conscious awareness in our school systems. Those guys really have a lot of things to contribute. But I do have to reiterate as well that my kind of personal statement was that Beto O'Rourke is most likely using this as a gateway into something to advance his political career. It's very possible that Beto O'Rourke could be a future presidential contender, down the line, maybe when he's 50, 60 years old, 70 years old. He has the world ahead of him as long as he goes through life with no scandals. And we don't really know what's going to be happening with all that. Pardon me, the stream just dropped for a second there. But the big thing that we would like to look at is what really are Beto's chances of winning the nomination against Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and Joe Biden. If I have to make a prediction now, mid March 2019, I would say that it's horribly unlikely that he could actually defeat all of these people. What I would say is that a lot of people are viewing Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden as just like, we've heard so much of them and they don't feel like they are satisfied with the contenders in the race. They might turn to somebody like Beto O'Rourke. However, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the person who's really going to just kind of unify the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party seems so fragmented. Someone was writing about that on Twitter. They were like, how are they going to defeat Donald Trump in the 2020 general election if they're so fragmented? What I can say is that Kamala Harris seems somewhat intimidated about him. She put out two newsletters. These are just kind of the things in the email chain. But she put out two of these kind of email newsletters saying, first, welcome to the race, Beto O'Rourke. And the second one was, okay, Beto's in the race now. Can you please chip into my campaign? Like, seriously, chip into my campaign? Kamala Harris seemed a little bit on edge about having Beto O'Rourke in the race. Well, I don't necessarily think that he has the highest chances of winning, but what I can say is I don't think that Beto might have the resources that Kamala Harris does. There must be an enormous amount of money that has been poured into her campaign. There must be an enormous amount of power behind the Kamala Harris campaign. They added me to her email list and I didn't even want to be on it. They're just kind of reaching out to kind of people who have any sort of connection. They're trying to get money from a lot of places. She's just being everywhere in the media. Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke, I think I describe both of them as lackluster. I think they're just ordinary power hungry politicians. And that's kind of the end of the story. And I do have to insist something about that. I am not that impressed with Beto O'Rourke's campaign or Kamala Harris's campaign. I haven't heard those overwhelmingly powerful ideas. Even Julian Castro is someone who talked about universal pre K education. And before we even talk about universal post secondary education, like, free college, free universities, before we even talk about that, universal pre K might be something that is actually much more beneficial to our society because it teaches children conflict resolution skills at an earlier age. And I mean, those are good things to be talking about in the primary. And Bernie Sanders went along with that as well. Like, I mean, he openly endorsed universal pre K in his town hall meeting with Wolf Blitzer. I mean, town hall with, that was hosted by Wolf Blitzer as well as, of course, all of the people asking questions. I think Beto O'Rourke is going to be someone who's going to be probably charming the crowds, even though I don't see kind of the appeal to what he's talking about. But a lot of the people seem somewhat energized. I would say, though, that in comparison, Bernie Sanders is much better at energizing the crowds. He's just sort of talks to everyone. He's just like, hey, you're the working class. Hey, you're the ordinary Americans. You deserve this. You deserve more. You deserve this, that, and the other. And if you don't have this, then everything is just going to fall apart. So let's, move forward. And a lot of people love that stuff. Bernie Sanders kind of has that kind of more political charisma aspect than Beto O'Rourke does, as well as some like other people though, like that are kind of similarly in the race. But what I would say though, that kind of we really have to think that a lot of the things associated with this race are about personality as opposed to ideas. I don't really think people care too much about ideas in this race now. When it comes to somebody like Andrew Yang, people are really talking about ideas. They're talking about the freedom dividend. They're talking about kind of the rise of automation, what's going to happen with self driving cars, the war on normal people, all of those things. But, like, when we want to talk about some of the other things, I mean, when it comes to Bernie and Kamala Harris and even Tulsi Gabbard, people are only really talking about the kind of labels. Like, they're Bernie, they're just like, oh, a socialist can't win, or they're just like, we don't really think universal education and healthcare and housing are sort of something that we can achieve in any sort of affordable way. People are very pessimistic, not among Bernie's base. I mean, there is a base of Bernie followers, and a lot of people who are outside of that circle are just very pessimistic that Bernie could deliver on all those promises, and that would mean that even if he did become president, he would be an ordinary politician. I mean, I think that Bernie Sanders, and this might be a controversial statement for some people, but I think regardless of his stances on, the free college, free health care, all of those things, now the Democratic Socialists are talking about free housing. Housing is a basic human right. They're saying these things, right? Well, the thing is, I would say that even if Bernie did not deliver on those, he has a certain sense of leadership that he could really kind of unify a crowd. Does Beto O'Rourke have that? I haven't seen too much of that from him, in his like speeches and his presentations and his debates. He seems a little bit just kind of ordinary, to be honest. I mean, there's some people who can energize a crowd, and even if Bernie Sanders hadn't entered the race and hadn't chosen to run for the presidency, I mean, somebody like Nina Turner, the president of Our Revolution, was really good at drumming up support for the crowds for Bernie. The things like when I heard Nina Turner give public speaking appearances that were not associated with the Bernie Sanders campaign, I was not very much impressed with that. But she's somebody who's in the same situation as Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon. And that is that what's the point of running for president versus in the race? They have the same platform as Bernie, more or less, except Jeff Merkley is a little more watered down. And we did an upload about him recently, where it would be like, what would be the point of entering the race if you're just sort of a lesser known, watered down version of Bernie Sanders? It's like, what would you be contributing? And like we also mentioned, that's why Rocky Anderson of the Justice Party chose not to run in 2015, because he wisely just endorsed Bernie Sanders. And even though that meant that we didn't have Rocky Anderson in the race, who does have a good voice and has like a lot of things to say. I mean, I loved hearing the things from the Justice Party back in 2012. I mean, he sort of made the kind of right choice politically because, once again, it's like you're talking about building up force. And that's a very big thing that we can kind of discuss right now. There's that group, the Tax Wall Street Party, that I mentioned that is very critical of Beto O'Rourke. In fact, they don't like Beto O'Rourke. Their person seems to be Elizabeth Warren right now. That I mean, they won't be running their own candidate. They will endorse Elizabeth Warren. Why? Because they put out a kind of a statement that voting is tactical. It is not a marriage. It is not a contract. It is tactical. It's about asking yourself, what is the objective that you are trying to accomplish, and who is the person that is most likely to make that happen? That's what your vote is. It's not about, finding the person that is the candidate of your dreams. It's not about choosing the person that, you think is the best person to be president. It's about asking yourself, what is most likely to make your objective happen? And the thing is, though, sometimes you have to weigh the lesser of two evils. This is all from the Tax Wall Street Party, right? If you don't choose the lesser of two evils, then the greater evil will still be there, and you didn't do anything to stop it. So you can't complain and be like, oh well, this person got into the White House. Well, you should have voted for the other person. That's their kind of presentation on that. And I have some mixed feelings because I've been talking about them. They're a third party themselves. I mentioned the Justice Party with Rocky Anderson, and we've done numerous uploads about the Libertarian Party. And with the Libertarians, it's like they're going to be all over the map as well. Sam Cedar, the talk show host and host of the Majority Report, is running for president, and he is just kind of trying to make fun of libertarians to kind of embarrass them. Daryl W. Perry, whom I kind of have talked about a lot on this channel, was a Libertarian candidate in 2016. I think it's a shame that he isn't running, because I thought he would have contributed a lot. And there's the possibility that Representative Joe Walsh, formerly of Illinois' 8th Congressional District, will run on the Libertarian ticket. I was horribly critical of Representative Joe Walsh in an upload I did about him on this channel, but I do have to say, though, he's pretty good at some strategy for party politics. But if you want to talk about party politics, I used to describe myself as an anti-partisan. I don't even use that label anymore. I'm not much of connecting to anything, because that's the big thing that you want to do with a recording like this. It's not about Republicans, it's not about Democrats, it's not about liberal or conservative. When we put out recordings like this, it's really just to try and put out some genuine criticism. What's really happening? What's really going on? And it's so many people turn to kind of talk radio and podcasts looking for something that's just going to tell them what they want to hear, just kind of repeat the belief system that they have. But that's not what we really can do when it comes to, political thinking. What about all that stuff we just talked about voting as tactical? What is your objective? How are you going to know your objective is if you only hear one side of the story? Or more importantly, if you actually view this as just a two-sided story. This is not just two sides. It's not just about Republicans and Democrats. It is about what is really going to happen. And like, if you just kind of eliminate the party labels, forget about Democrats and Republicans, what is this person's likelihood of winning the presidency? What is the chance that they're actually going to defeat other contenders? Where are they going to finish in the polls? And furthermore, what do they really believe about these issues? And that's the heart and soul of recordings like this. It's not so much about reinforcing anyone's belief system or just saying kind and cozy words about the candidate that you choose to like the most. It's really about kind of trying to expose the situation for what it truly is. And when it comes to somebody like Beto O'Rourke, I think that it's a very low chance that he's actually going to win the nomination. He's most likely running to further his own career. I'm really kind of nervous about him taking so much money from the fossil fuel industries and then trying to pass himself off as somewhat of a progressive Democrat. And then it's also like he just seems like someone who probably could be a flip flopping politician. I get that sense from him. And that's not to be any sort of kind of rude, condescending, or demeaning attitude toward Beto O'Rourke. That's just trying to tell it like it is and call it how you see it. It's also possible that we will see Beto O'Rourke as a major contender in the future elections. I mentioned that, and who knows what hat he'll be wearing at that time. But in reality, the Democratic primary is so messy right now. We have candidates all across the board, and here's a big thing, though. A big thing that we can kind of ask, just to throw out another controversial statement. How much does it affect Beto O'Rourke that he is a white male? I mean, like, what really, how much do the Democrats value identity when it comes to this? How much do they value these diversity things? Because some people are really insisting that Democrats need a woman and they need a person of color. And there's apparently today, Joe Biden met with Stacey Abrams, the former gubernatorial candidate in Georgia during the midterms. Kind of like people are speculating, oh, will there be a Joe Biden Stacey Abrams ticket? Stacey Abrams is, of course, an African American female. So it's like, is it that much is important to them to put up diversity? I mean, people are going to be looking to Kamala Harris or someone like Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, if you want to talk about diversity, yes, this would be a great thing. And I mean, like diversity, anyone's an American, but at the same time, you have to choose the person who would be the best president. Pardon me, stream got dropped again for a second. I don't know what's going on tonight. But anyway, you have to choose the person who's just going to be the best president, regardless of, skin color, last name, gender, even. And there are so many great people out there. No matter what, if you have to choose a person who's a white male, if you think he's the best possible president, vote for that person in the primary. And if you have to choose somebody who is of a more diverse background, vote for that person in the primary. I mean, but people have raised this question about Beto O'Rourke. That's why I'm discussing it now. I think the sort of future projection for the country that we need to put out is we need to choose the person regardless of any sort of race, ethnicity, and no matter what, gender, even sexual orientation, vote for the person that you believe is the best. Is Beto O'Rourke the best candidate for the president? Well, that's up to the voters to decide. I did mention a few things. I don't think he's the most engaging public speaker compared to some of the other people out there. I don't think he's provided the boldest image and demonstrated the kind of best foresight and anticipation compared to some of the other candidates in the primary. But there's still a chance. There's always a chance Beto O'Rourke will be the Democratic nominee. What do you think? Please drop a comment.